At the end of the 1970s and the start of the 1980s, a new scene started to bubble up in the UK that would later be known as the New Romantic Movement. It didn't come out of nowhere. It had been brewing quietly in London clubs like Blitz, as well as in the soul and fashion scenes around Essex and other parts of the country. People were getting tired of the worn-out punk look and sound, and this new scene was a chance to do something more stylish, theatrical, and electronic. It began as a club scene but quickly became something more. It was driven just as much by fashion as it was by music. Dressing up was a major part of it. You'd see people in frilly shirts, military jackets, leather trousers, jodhpurs and pixie boots. Outfits were often handmade or pieced together from vintage shops, army surplus stores or little market stalls. The goal was to stand out, look fantastic, and do it in your own way. Makeup played a big role too, with both men and women wearing dramatic looks, heavy eyeliner, bright eyeshadows, pale foundations and sometimes bold lipstick, creating an androgynous theatrical style that matched the flamboyant clothes perfectly. Music-wise, something new was happening. Bands like the Human League, The Normal, and Throbbing Gristle had already started exploring electronic sounds that felt colder and darker than the synth music coming out of Germany. This edge was something British artists grabbed onto and made their own. While the fashionistas danced at the clubs, the soundtrack slowly changed from punk and glam to a colder, sleeker sound full of synthesizers, drum machines and future-facing ideas. Some bands were right at the heart of this change. Spandau Ballet started as regulars at the Blitz Club before forming a band in 1979. Visage, with Steve Strange fronting and members from Ultravox involved, took Club Cool into the charts with the single Fade to Grey. Duran Duran burst onto the scene soon after, mixing sharp style with catchy pop and a hunger for fame. Adam and the Ants were also part of this shift, though their look and sound stood apart, more tribal, theatrical, and driven by big drums. In 1980, everything seemed to happen at once. David Bowie's Ashes to Ashes video dropped in the summer, full of surreal visuals and Pierrot-inspired styling that matched the new romantic mood perfectly. Spandau Ballet had their first chart success that autumn. Then Visage followed with Fade to Grey, and suddenly it felt like this scene had jumped from late-night London clubs straight into mainstream pop culture. By 1981, the movement had gone national. Clubs around the country started putting on nights that played this new music and welcomed the wild fashions that came with it. Nottingham, for instance, had Rock City, a venue that supported this new wave right from the start. Bands like Duran Duran and Soft Cell played there early on. Soft Cell had a moody, synth-driven sound and a unique visual identity that caught people's attention. Their single Memorabilia didn't make a splash at first, but later became a cult classic. Other acts like Depeche Mode, Classics Nouveau, Naked Lunch and B-Movie were also making their way into the scene. They might have started on smaller labels, but their look and sound fit the new romantic style perfectly. B-Movie, based in Mansfield, played across the UK and helped take this look and sound beyond the big cities. There were gigs in places like Retford Porterhouse, Dudley JB's and Preston Warehouse. Not exactly glamorous, but full of energy. Japan were another key band, not only in terms of their music, but also in terms of their fashion. With their styled hair, pale makeup and elegant clothes, they looked like art school dandies from the future. Their music combined synths with emotional vocals, anchored by the bassist Mick Karn's signature melodic, fretless lines, jazz-inflected, fluid and rich in expressive slides and vibrato. Singles like Quiet Life, Life in Tokyo, and The Art of Parties made them standouts on the scene. They had a polished, almost dreamlike quality that others would later try to copy. The movement split into slightly different camps. Some followed the more serious, moody synth sound that became known as synth pop or futurist. Others leaned more into the image-led new romantic style, where it was as much about how you looked as how you sounded. Bands like Soft Cell and Ultravox managed to balance both worlds, while others leaned more into visuals and performance. There were plenty of attempts to keep the scene exciting as it started to grow beyond the clubs. Bands began doing live performances at night spots, often alongside fashion shows or art-based visuals. It wasn't about big tours just yet. It was about moments, scenes, and being part of something that felt new and unrepeatable. These weren't traditional gigs. They were closer to immersive events where clothes, music, and performance blurred together. In places like London's Blitz Club or Billy's, and later at venues like Rock City in Nottingham, the energy was electric. DJs played cutting-edge electronic tracks, dancers moved in stylized, theatrical ways, and everyone showed up looking like they belonged in a pop video. As more bands broke into the charts and appeared on shows like Top of the Pops, the underground side of the movement started to fade. The charts were soon full of acts that had come from the clubs, not just Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet, but also ABC, Ultravox, and even Culture Club, who brought in soul and reggae influences along with a wild, colourful look. Boy George, with his unforgettable outfits and charisma, became one of the most recognisable faces of the early 80s. By 1982, the scene was shifting. Clubs changed names, some moved away from the new romantic look, and the music started to evolve. But the influence was still there. Bands continued to release synth-heavy pop, and many of the fashion trends lingered. Even newer clubs still played the big tracks from 1980 and 1981, keeping the style and spirit alive. The new romantic movement has since been remembered and retold in documentaries and retrospectives, often focused on London. But the truth is, it was bigger than just one city, and even bigger than Britain itself. From Birmingham to Nottingham to Manchester, people were dressing up, dancing to synth pop, and creating their own versions of the scene. And as British bands began to chart internationally, the look and sound travelled. In West Germany, clubs in cities like Berlin and Dusseldorf embraced the mix of electronic music and androgynous glamour, blending it with their own synth and industrial heritage. In France, the movement's theatrical style resonated with Parisian fashion circles, while in Italy it merged with the country's disco and Italo-pop culture. Across the Netherlands, Belgium, and Scandinavia, students and clubgoers adopted the hairstyles, makeup, and dramatic clothing seen in British magazines and music videos, creating a pan-European network of style and sound. It wasn't always glossy. Many local scenes were DIY, improvised, and defiantly uncommercial. But the shared energy, creativity, and love of spectacle tied them together. What made the new romantics special wasn't just the music or the clothes, it was the attitude. It gave people permission to dream, to perform, and to imagine a future that looked and sounded completely different from what had come before. It was a moment when style and sound came together in bold, beautiful, and sometimes bizarre ways.